Okay, so here we have it. This is the crane setup, the Kessler crane that I have, and my trusty assistant Squeak is going to help. This film was shot and edited on the iPhone 3G. Imagine that! So here are all the parts and pieces. Pretty much we have the camera, and that's in the bag there. We have our crane, of course. We have our trusty tripod, which is really heavy and does very well for handling the kind of weight that you need for a crane. And there is our dolly, which I'll use to move it around to make it much easier to move from location to location. So I got to test and set up all this stuff, and me and Pipsqueak are going to move to the next step, and we'll be back. Okay, well, as you can see here, we've got our tripod. We have to put it on to our tripod dolly here, and in order for them to fit, the legs to go in here properly, they have to go down in those little wells, and then we have to put a screw that goes through all the way through to the other side to connect to make sure that these are nice and secure. But this one has a big bottom level spreader here on the bottom, which I've already unhooked. They unhook from the feet here, and we can pull that out of the way. Then once we've done that, we now have to remove these feet, because these feet are not going to allow us to use the holes here, which are going to give us access to pass through into our sockets. So now we have to do that. That's our next step. So those are the feet from off the bottom, and we don't really need those, so those can go in the bag for safekeeping. Move on to the next step. Okay, for our next segment, we put the head just right there in that bag, and we're going to put it here on the crane. We already have our block, a big screw there to go in there. So all we got to do is pretty much put that on there and screw it right in. And as you can see, a couple of minutes of struggling with the knobs to try to get it all screwed on there tightly. We now have our head that's attached, so we can move our camera independently, doing smooth pans while we lift up and down and so forth. Gives us a little more flexibility when we're shooting. And this is a Gitzo head, by the way. Very nice. Okay. Next step is to put these pieces together. And by simply taking these little knobs off here, slide the other end onto this and put the screws back in, and voila. And then of course you have to connect the arm here as well, and that controls the pivot point here up and down for the base for the head. So put it together. Next step, here we go. So now that the crane is assembled, we're going to need to, when we've put the head on the front, going to have to take the plate that goes on the tripod and move it and clamp it to the crane here, like so, to give us a mounting point. And we're going to screw it in with these right here. So that's our next step. The head's installed. The head is installed. There it is. So it sits underneath, so we just pop it right on top of the tripod and slide it on, and it's all good to go with the head on that side with the camera, and then the control line that runs along the bottom to the handle at the back, and then of course the counterweight section, which we haven't got to that point yet. But the next step, since I'm doing this by myself, is to pick up that whole rig and put it onto the tripod, and unfortunately I can't film that at least easily. So I'll be right back. So there it is. I have it on top of the tripod. Now I need to add the camera and the counterweights, as well as the LCD monitor, which clips on over here at this end. And should be ready to go. Camera's attached at the bottom. Ready to go. I just need to get the appropriate counterweight and of course my screen. Got my cable tied up ready to plug it in there, and I gotta get the cable here that goes out. That'll actually feed the LCD screen, and we'll be back after these messages. And here's the completed job. I have our appropriate amount of counterweights to make this thing completely vertical and still. There's the LCD installed. The cable runs up to the camera. There you have it. Crane installation with dollying tripod done. What was funny is when I put this together, I noticed that when I put the right amount of weight on, it was still, the weights were a little too heavy until I put the tape in the camera. And then all of a sudden the weight was fine. So you always have to make sure that the camera, including the tape, is in to make sure that your crane is weighted and beautiful and moves smoothly and freely with ease. You should be able to go way up. Way up. That is the maximum. That's pretty damn tall. Let's back up to get a perspective on just how tall that is. It's above the roof line there. Way above the roof line on the garage. So we have good height.